Hello, these are our notes over Station 6 in our polynomials unit. This is 21.2 out of our book, and that is solving equations by factoring ax squared plus bx plus c. In Station 5, you'll remember that we just did when I had when we had x squared plus bx plus c. So our a value was always an understood 1. Now in this unit, our a value is going to be another number other than 1. So I'll tell you, so like looking at the same example, or the first example, we have a 2 there in place of the a. Again, previous station, it was always a 1. So now we have another number besides that. This truly is the same process of that x method that we talked about in the last unit. So we're going to do our x method again. There's only one additional step, and it's kind of what I have over here off to the side. After dividing by a, you must reduce the fraction. So I'm going to first start here with my x. Remember that the first part of the problem is that you take your a value times your c value. So I'm taking 2 times 5, and my 10 goes in the top of the x. Now I'm taking my b value, which is my 11. And so this case, my 11 is going down here in the bottom of my x. Remember now, it's those numbers that you can multiply together to give you 10, and then add together to give you 11. And so if you have to, again, like we did in Station 5 in the last lesson, take your 10, take that top number, and start writing out the factors. So 1 times 10 is 10. 2 times 5 gives me 10. 3 does not divide into 10. 4 does not divide into 10. So it is, and then 5 is listed, so I know I'm done. So in this case, 1 plus 10 does give me 11. So I'm going to have my 1 and my 10 on either side of my x. Doesn't matter which one goes where. Remember my next value. Now, here's where it's different. In the previous lesson, we always divided by 1 because my 1 was my a value. Now I'm dividing by the actual a value I have there, in this case a different number besides 1, which is 2. Here is then the next big step. And if you wanted to go ahead and put in the x in the bottom. The biggest next step though is this part. So I would star, highlight, whatever you need. If you need a highlighter, let me know. You must reduce your fractions. So when I'm looking at this now, 1 over 2. 1 over 2 doesn't reduce. It's a half. That's as far as it can go. I can leave it as it is. But if I look at 10 over 2, 10 over 2 does reduce. It does reduce down to 5 over 1. And if I were you, if you're not sure about reducing your fractions, go ahead and use the fraction button in the calculator. Remember how you can go to math, over to fraction, then type in your 10 over 2, hit enter, and it'll reduce it down to 5 over 1 for you, or just 5. If it gives you that whole number like 5, it is going to be just 5 over 1. So now my x stays down there in the bottom. And now, just like we did previously with the x method, I'm going to read my answer from the bottom up. So now here on the left hand side, if I read that first set of parentheses, it's going to be 2x, the positive 1, so 2x plus 1. And my second set, I read the reduced fraction. So now I have a 1x, or just x, and now the reduced fraction is a plus 5. And so there is my answer. My answer would be 2x plus 1 times 1x plus 5. Again, remember, it doesn't matter which order you put those in. I could write it as x plus 5 times 2x plus 1. Doesn't matter which way you write it, as long as you have both parentheses. So again, it's very, very similar to what we have done previously. So take a minute, try these two on your own. Go ahead and put the x in here. both of them. But again, take a minute, try both of these on your own, pause the video, see if you get the right answer. If you have questions, please ask. Okay, so hopefully now you are at the point where you're checking your answer. Here you should have had 5 times -8, which would have been a -40. Down at the bottom, I'm taking my b value, which is the -18 from the middle. Again, I'm trying to find those numbers that multiply to give me -40, that at the same time are going to add together to give me -18. So here's a great place again. Write out that list. I have my -40 over here. I'm going to find those numbers that multiply together to give me that -40. So here in this case, I could do 1 and 40. 2 divides into 40 20 times. 3 is not going to divide into 40, but I'd have 4 does, 4 and 10. 5 divides into 40, 5 and 8. 6 does not. If you tried 6 on the calculator, it would give you a decimal. 7 does not. And 8 I already have listed. So there's my whole list of numbers, my factors of -40. Here in this case then, I want to find, but let me say this too, because it's a negative, you should know that one of those numbers is going to be positive, one of those is going to be negative. So as I then go through my list, well, 1 and 40, even if one of them's negative, the biggest number I'm going to get is 39. That's not going to help. Here in one of these cases, 2 and -20 would give me -18. Or +18, I want the negative. So this is the set I'm going to use. In this case, I am going to put my negative on the 20 because it's a bigger number, and that'll give me the -18. So in this case, again, those two numbers, my -20, my +2 are going to go on the sides of the x. Here's where then I have to divide both of these numbers by your a value. In this case, my a value is 5. So I'm going to divide this one by 5 as well. I'm going to put my x in the bottom. And I must reduce my fraction. So 2 over 5, I'm not going to reduce. -20 over 5 is going to reduce down to -4 over 5. Or I'm sorry, -4 over 1. And there's my x. Because 5 goes into 24 times, and have my 1 left over in the bottom. And then again, read your answer from the bottom up. So my answer to this one should have been, let me type it up so you guys can see it better instead of me trying to write with the mouse. Here in this case, my answer then should have been 5x plus 2 and 1x minus 4, or just x minus 4 would be perfectly fine. Again, order of the problem doesn't matter, but there is my answer to this one. Okay. Try the next one, and hopefully you tried it already. 3 times -24 is going to give me a -72. I want to figure out which ones of those will add together to give me 14. So again, multiply together to give me -72. Add together to give me 14. So over off to the side, I'm going to do my -72. 1, 72, 2, 36. 3 and 24 were the two that I multiplied together to get the 72. 4 is going to divide in there. Once trying to do this, 18. 5 would not. 6 will go in there 12 times. 7 will not go into it evenly. And then I have 8 times 9 gives me 72. So there's my list of possible numbers. So again, because it's a negative number, I know right off the bat that I'm going to have one of these is positive, one of these is negative, and I want to figure out which one's going to add together to give me a positive 14. Hopefully you can see that here in your list, if I do 4 and 18, and I make one of those negative, I make the 4 negative. So in this case, I would have a -4 on one side, positive 18 on the other side of my x. Divide both of these by your a value, so I'm dividing by 3. my x down in the bottom. Reduce your fractions. So here, 18 over 3 does reduce. Okay, 3 goes into 18 6 times, so I would have 6 over 1. Put my x down in the bottom. Here, this does not reduce at all. And so again, remember that you are just truly reading your answer from the bottom up. So my answer here in this case is going to be x plus 6 and 3x minus 4. And there's my answer. And so last is just, again, the idea of solving these. And this is where, again, you are going to use that zero product property. There's a couple key points here, is it has to be in this standard form, must be equal to 0. So I may need to move things to the other side, kind of like we did in the examples in the last section. And you might need to combine like terms. Okay, so I always, and it doesn't matter. I usually move things to the left, but I also make sure everything's going to stay positive, or my A value is going to be positive. If A is negative, it makes my problem a whole lot harder to factor and to find those numbers. So I always try to make this A value be positive, and so I'm going to move it to the one where A is bigger. So here, this is a positive 2x squared. So I want to move this over here with the 4x squared, so I'm going to subtract the 2x squared, which means then I want this side to be equal to 0, so I'm going to subtract the 7x, and I'm going to add 2. So I'm going to add 2 here. Now there's not a place to subtract the 7x, so I'm going to just carry it over. So then, in this case, when I write this out, 4x squared minus 2x squared is going to give me that 2x squared. I have that minus 7x I had to subtract over, nothing to combine it with, and then I have 4 plus 2 gives me 6, and now that's equal to 0. So now that I have it equal to 0, I can't do my zero product property yet. So what I have to do is I have to factor it. Remember, it has to be two things being multiplied together to use a zero product property. So I'm going to set both of these here in this case. Oops, remember you're doing your A times your C. So 2 times 6 is giving me the 12. My B value is negative 7. And now again, I'm finding those numbers that multiply to give me 12, that add together to give me negative 7. Maybe some of you thought about it and all of that, figured it out already. It would be negative 3 and a negative 4. I'm now going to divide these two numbers by your A value. So in this case, I'm going to divide by, my A value is now 2. So I'm dividing this by 2. Put the x down with it in the denominator. That's what I'm dividing by. Oops. Sorry, my line didn't become a line over here, did it? Well, it did, but it's not a horizontal line to make it a fraction. I wasn't paying attention. Sorry. There's my fraction. There's my 2x. Negative 3 over 2 does not reduce. But here, if I reduce this down, that would give me negative 2 over 1x. And so now I can read my answer from the bottom up. So I would have, again, if I factored this, I would have 2x minus 3, and I would have x minus 2, or 1x minus 2, equal to 0. But now that both of them are equal to 0, I can take each one, set it equal to 0, and now I can solve both of these problems. So on the first one, I can just add 3 to both sides. So I'm adding 3 here, adding 3 here. This one, I would add 2 to both sides. So now, let me make myself more room here, guys. So here, I would have 2x equals 3. This one I have x equals 2, so that one's already solved. Here I have one last step. I'm just going to have to divide both sides by 2. And so I'm going to get the fraction x equals 3 over 2. And just leave it as that fraction. Okay, if you wanted to change it to 1 over 2, or I'm sorry, 1/2, that's fine. 1 and 1/2. 1.5, that would be fine as well. So my two answers to this problem when it said solve are x equals 2 and x equals 3 over 2. Remember, those are the places where my parabola, where my quadratic, my U-shaped graph crosses the x-axis. So I know where those two numbers are in this case without having to use Desmos. We might have been able to use Desmos, and we used it a lot in this class because you were able to use it on the state test. But as you guys get older and you go into Algebra 2 and go to take the ACT, at this point right now, you're not allowed using Desmos on the ACT, on the paper pencil ACT. And so that's why these are some good ways that we can solve these without having to worry about the ACT or without a Desmos. Okay, so take a minute, pause the video, try this next one. And again, I need to make this equal to 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract the 10x, subtract 3. If I do it from that side, I have to do it from this other side, from the left-hand side. And so now in this case, I now have a polynomial that is 8x squared minus 10x minus 3. Again, I want it in standard form. That's why the first station was so important, understanding your terms, your variables, standard form, highest down to lowest. Because if it's not in that form, then I really can't do our x method. So now if I go to do my x method, there's my x. I'm going to do 8 times negative 3 is going to give me a negative 24 up on my top of my x. My b value is going in the bottom of my x, my negative 10. I am now finding the numbers that multiply together to give me negative 24, that add together to give me 10. So in this case, hopefully you found that that would have been negative 12 and 2. Some people in this case might have thought about 6 and 4. 6 times 4 is 24, but I need a negative 24. So that tells me that I was going to have one of them positive and one of them negative, which if I did 6 and 4, the only way to get 10 is to both of them be the same sign, neither both positive or both negative. And I needed one of them positive, one of them negative because of the negative 24 up in the top. So it has to be the negative 12 and the positive 2. So now I'm going to divide both of those by our a value. In this case, our a value is the 8. So I'm going to divide this by 8x, divide this side by 8x, and then reduce down your fraction. This is one case here where you do have to simplify both fractions. So here in this case, 4 divides into negative 12 over and 8. So that's going to actually give me negative 3 over 2 x. And there's my fraction. And then 2 over 8 does actually also reduce down. 2 divides into both of them. 2 divided into 2 is 1. 8 divided by 2 is 4. And so I do have that fraction now. And so now I can read my answers from the bottom up again. So here I would have 2x minus 3. And then I would have 4x plus 1. These are equal to 0. And so again, now I can take each one of these, set them equal to 0, and solve. Oops, sorry guys, equal to 0. Let me try to go back to the pen. This will go a lot faster instead of having to type. So here I'm just going to add 3. Add 3 to both sides. Whoa. Maybe I should go back to the typing. Let's try that again. I'm going to add the 3. There we go. So I'd have 2x equals 3. Divide both sides by 2. So you get x is equal to 3 over 2. And then on this one, you're subtracting 1 on both sides. I just swear I'm not moving it that much. I don't know why the mouse is not working that well. I'm subtracting 1 on both sides. So here now I have 4x equals -1, divide by 4, divide this by 4, so you get an answer. And 4 does not divide into -1 evenly, so just leave it as a fraction. Just leave it as a fraction, -1/4. Don't try to make it, again, if you want to type it in the calculator, fine, and get the decimal, fine, but don't make it harder. Just leave it as the fractions. 3/2 and -1/4. So not much different, just those kind of last little parts where you have to divide by a, and you must again simplify your fraction. And that is all for station 6. Okay. If you have any questions, please stop me and ask. I will gladly go over it with you.